ability to design programs that best serve their unique populations. We responsibly unwind the Obamacare Medicaid expansion while treating those covered under the expansion today fairly. And we refocus Medicaid's limited resources to the patients most in need. We propose a per capita allotment to determine a fair level of funding for states. This type of allotment has been supported not just by Republicans, but also by key Democrats like former President Bill Clinton, who recommended it. Simply put, we have a better way to deliver solutions that put patients, not bureaucrats, first. We provide the American people with what they've asked for all along: greater choice, lower cost, flexibility to choose the plan that best suits their needs. I now recognize my friend from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, for a 3-minute opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
I recognize the gentleman from New Jersey for an opening statement.
I have a unanimous consent request.
The vice-ranking member, and I have to say, Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware that I've actually mentioned to the Republican members.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve the right to object.
Okay.
Whatever it is they're going to offer.
Well, Mr. Chairman, just so you know, because I don't think I've mentioned before that we decided in our Democratic caucus that we would have vice rankers. I know you have vice chairs, so we have vice rankers now for our committees, and Ms. Castor was elected unanimously by the Democrats on the Energy and Commerce Committee to be our vice ranking member. She has a unanimous consent request.
What's the gentlelady's request?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Healthcare is so important to our families all across the country, and the Republican bill makes such drastic...
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to object if she's not...
I'm sorry, that's...
I know that you've limited our... because this is so important that you allow us to also take 3 minutes as the leaders have.
As the gentlelady...
That's the request. I will object.
We communicated the plan for the committee markup yesterday. We heard no objections back, so this is all sort of new. Look, we're going to have plenty of time to discuss these issues. I recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone.
Mr. Chairman, may I, for a unanimous consent request?
I recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, for an opening statement.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we have unanimous consent requests from members of the committee.
So this is no surprise you told me.
If they want to object, you can.
The gentleman from New Mexico, for what purpose does he seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, maybe if I could just restate the previous unanimous consent request, because Ms. Castor was elected one of our leadership out of this committee, if at the very least she'd be recognized for 3 minutes, while I respect the chairman's discretion at not recognizing the rest of us for that time.
I object.
We have an objection to the UC.
I am serious.
All right.
Well,
let's.
Mr. Could I?
Other people could yield to her as well.
Could I speak on my reservation, just briefly?
The gentleman is recognized to speak on his reservation.
Briefly. If it's truly just going to be one person, the gentlelady from Florida, I would ask the gentleman from Illinois, with the chairman's support, to withdraw and let her have 3, with the understanding that the vice chairman, myself, there's no requirement that there's vice. We know there's vice on both sides of the aisle, so I should have 3 also.
Without objection. We will accord Ms. Castor 3 minutes. We'll record Mr. Barton 3 minutes. I now recognize again the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Republican repeal bill before us will seriously harm American families. Most people who garnered health insurance under the ACA will lose their coverage. Those who retain health insurance will pay a lot more for less coverage, and states will seriously ration care for those who still have Medicaid. For 7 years, Republicans claimed to have a better way, but it turns out that is nothing more than an empty slogan. After 7 years of sabotaging and obstructing the ACA, Republicans have finally presented a repeal bill less than 2 days ago that is incredibly destructive to the little guy, to the average working man and woman. Now, Mr. Chairman, I'm not a fool, and neither is the American public. Throughout the coming days and weeks, Democrats and advocates alike will band together to bring transparency to this process, and we will expose the GOP policies for what they are, a prescription for disaster. Republicans, both the Speaker and our committee chairman, repeatedly said they would follow regular order. But not one hearing has been held on their repeal bill, and we have also not received analysis from the CBO. Regular order would require a hearing and markup in the Health Subcommittee before we get to the full committee markup here today. Can Republicans guarantee that the 20 million who have insurance today will continue to have health insurance under their plan? Clearly not. How many more millions of Americans will lose their health insurance as a result of this bill? Who will be covered? And what will people pay for needed health care? No response from the GOP. Now let's talk about what we do know about the Republican repeal bill. With devastating cuts and caps on Medicaid, it will ration care for the 76 million Americans who rely on Medicaid, including seniors with long-term care needs, Americans with disabilities, pregnant women, and vulnerable children, virtually ending Medicaid as we know it. Working families could see their premiums and deductibles increase by hundreds of thousands of dollars. And seniors will pay an age tax and be forced to pay premiums 5 times higher than what others pay for health insurance. One reason that the AARP came out strongly against the GOP repeal bill yesterday. The bill also shortens the life of the Medicare Trust Fund, putting the care of 57 million American seniors and people with disabilities at risk. The Republican repeal bill will institute a cancer tax, and Americans with pre-existing conditions will suffer. Insurers will once again be able to charge more or discriminate against Americans with pre-existing conditions when their coverage lapses for any reason. The Republican repeal bill is a giant transfer of wealth, taking from hardworking families and giving to the rich. In fact, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation, the bill would cut taxes for the rich and corporations by about $600 million, so billionaires will benefit while Republicans dump huge out-of-pocket costs on working families. Frankly, this is a disgrace. Americans today have better health coverage and health care thanks to the ACA. The American people do not want to see it repealed, and Democrats will fight Republican efforts to dismantle the health and economic security of millions of hardworking Americans. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Barton, for 3 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to commend you and the staff and the members who've worked on the draft that we're going to debate today for your effort and your work product. Make no mistake, this is a necessary thing. The Affordable Care Act is fatally flawed, and it is, as some people have said, in a death spiral. If Mrs. Clinton had won the election and the Democrats had won the House, we would be here today holding a similar markup. It's a simple fact that the Affordable Care Act, as it's currently construed, will not work. The draft is a good effort, and I intend to support it. Having said that, it can be improved upon. I'm sure my friends on the Democratic side are going to offer many amendments in the course of this markup, some of them thoughtful and well-intentioned, some not so thoughtful, not so well-intentioned. I've been there, Mr. Chairman. I've sat where Mr. Pallone is. In fact, I was in his chair when the Affordable Care Act was marked up. So I know how that feels. At some point in the process, Mr. Chairman, I plan to offer myself 2 amendments. One that would give a date certain to the expansion of Medicaid in the states that have expanded it. The current draft doesn't end that until the end of 2019, and my amendment would end it at the end of this calendar year, the end of 2017. I also intend to offer an amendment to make sure that there is a date certain that the transition period back to the normal FMAP match occurs. Under the current draft, it's never definitively ended. My amendment would give a date certain of 2023. I plan to work very closely during the debate on all of the amendments. I look forward to a thoughtful markup and at the end of the process, moving the bill, I believe, to the Budget Committee. I'd be happy to yield the remaining 1 minute to anybody on the Republican side that wishes to use it. Seeing no hands, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Castor, for 3 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. This is a very disappointing place to start because this Republican bill will eliminate health coverage for millions of Americans. Plus, it takes this very radical turn against our neighbors that are in nursing home care Alzheimer's patients, kids that rely on Medicaid for their health services. A large portion of this bill really is focused on eliminating their care and eliminating the support to states that is vital for so many of our neighbors. What's interesting with this bill, it's in stark contrast to what the Democrats did a few years ago. The House Republicans for about 7 years have promised to replace the Affordable Care Act with something better and cheaper. This bill does not do that. Speaker Paul Ryan promised the American people their replacement bill would go through a thorough and transparent legislative process. Well, we know that's not true either. This bill was released less than 48 hours ago without a bipartisan Congressional Budget Office score, so we don't know how much it's going to cost. Experts say it's going to add to the deficit. We don't know how many people are going to lose their insurance and how high the uninsured rate will go up in America because of this bill, because they didn't take the time to wait to see what that CBO score said. On the Today Show with Matt Lauer, right at the end of February, the speaker said, we're going through the committee process. We're going to do this step by step. We're having public hearings. We're having committees work on legislation. This is how the legislative process is designed. We're not hatching some bill in a back room and plopping it on the American people's front door. Well, that's not true. We had members of Congress, Democrat and Republican, at the end of last week, searching the halls of the Capitol in back rooms for the bill. And they wouldn't produce it until Monday night. Less than a week later, the House Republicans are reneging on Speaker Ryan's pledge to introduce their replacement bill. Unlike the House Republicans, Democrats took the Affordable Care Act through an open and transparent process. Just a little reminder here, we held 79 bipartisan hearings on markups on the health insurance reform. House members back in the ACA days did 100 hours in hearings. We heard from 181 witnesses from both sides of the aisle. We considered 239 amendments, both Democratic and Republican, and accepted 121 amendments. The original House bill was posted online for 30 days before the first committee began their markup. And then there were more than 100 days before the tri-committees formally introduced their merged bill. House Democrats posted the first House bill online for the promised 72-hour review. This is important because this affects all Americans, all of our neighbors. They deserve a chance to weigh in, tell their stories.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Upton, for 1 minute.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those who know me know that I've got a long record of bipartisanship, especially when it comes to health care. I was proud to author with Representative DeGette legislation to speed up cures that passed this committee unanimously and was signed into law by President Obama. Sadly, the same bipartisan approach was not used in enacting Obamacare, and it shows. Premiums were promised to go down, but they increased by more than 16% just last year in Michigan. We passed a bill in 2013 that simply said if you like your health care plan, you can keep it on the House floor. That would have helped the nearly 5 million Americans who were kicked off their health plans under Obamacare. Most would agree that Obamacare is failing. Right now, Americans need results. Our families deserve access to quality health care, especially our most vulnerable and those with pre-existing conditions. You'll hear a lot of discussion today about Medicaid expansion. In Michigan, the number of folks enrolled exceeds 650,000. This bill ensures that the rug is not pulled out from underneath them. American people want and deserve a better way. I remain committed to working with all my colleagues to deliver bipartisan health care reform and relief for all.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Rush.
Mr. Chairman, I am in strong opposition to this devastatingly draconian and unabashedly evil bill that seeks to wreak havoc on the most vulnerable segment of our population, the working poor. First and foremost, Mr. Chairman, my opposition stems from the way that this bill has been brought to us today. This bill was produced in the entrails of a process that our constituents on both sides of the aisle have vocally and vehemently opposed. And I'm sure everyone on this committee is aware, Mr. Chairman, that just last week, Speaker Ryan on the Today Show stating that, quote, we're going through the committee process and we're having public hearings, end quote. Mr. Chairman, what impact did the members of this committee have into this legislation? What hearings were held that allowed us and the public to learn about the impact of this bill? To answer to those questions, Mr. Chairman, is absolutely none. Instead, this bill was hatched in a back room, prevented from being read by all but a select few, and plopped on last night's dinner table for the American people to digest and to just live with.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Has been so hushed.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Murphy, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that we're moving forward on this. I know one of the concerns I heard so consistently from my constituents was that in some cases under the Affordable Care Act, they could afford the premiums they couldn't afford to get sick because the deductibles were so massive for them. Heard that time and time again, and this bill will fix that and make it affordable. The second thing, I intend to offer an amendment later today regarding mental health care. This committee worked long hours to work on the Helping Families with Mental Health Crisis Act, which was put into the Cures Act, Mr. Upton's Cures Act. And parity is extremely important to all of us to make sure that mental health coverage remains intact. And I want to make sure that we do that in this bill and as we move forward, because we know when states coordinate care and integrate care between mental health and physical health coverage, that they actually provide better care, more compassionate care, and lower cost care. So I'll be offering that later. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
We appreciate that. Now recognizes my friend from California, Ms. Eshu, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very big day, and this is a very important undertaking. And, Mr. Chairman, you're my friend, you're my colleague, but I'm disappointed in this process. It really doesn't reflect the way you have operated before. It hasn't been transparent. We have been noticed right within seconds of when it needs to be noticed. It's rushed. Members are squeezed in terms of their comments. So this is a lousy process in plain English. Now, we've heard a great deal about the advertising and the rhetoric. This is going to be for everyone. It's going to cost less, and people are going to get more. But this doesn't pass the test of what the advertising is. This bill actually reduces benefits. It increases costs. Now, according to the CEO, and this bill is not scored either. We're in such a rush. Our colleagues don't want to know what it costs. Is it going to reduce more deficits? And I'll have more to say about it. The last thing I want to say is all of the members are enrolled in Obamacare.
The gentlelady's time has expired.
If it's good enough for us, it should be good enough.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak on what may well be the most important bill that I will have worked on in my congressional career. I have devoted my professional life to health care. I've devoted my time in public service to health policy. It is my highest priority to improve the state of health care in our nation, and to do so, we must put patients first, above politics, above partisanship. Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, the Affordable Care Act is packed with Washington mandates and federal regulations. One of the biggest cost drivers is the one-size-fits-all, Washington knows best approach, and I believe we are going to go far down the road of correcting that with this legislation today. Again, I would remind the committee that this is about people, helping people making tough decisions. The Affordable Care Act is nothing shy of a failed political and social experiment that ignored the need, the desire, and the will of individuals across this country. To those people, I simply say, we hear you. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Engel, for 1 minute.
Well, as Ronald Reagan used to say, there you go again. If people that didn't like Obamacare, they're going to hate this. This is going to cost them more, give them less coverage, bad for Americans, terrible for seniors. People making between $25,000 and $75,000 are the ones who are really going to be terribly harmed. In my district, more than 100,000 people have gained coverage through the marketplace or the Medicaid expansion. This will all go away. You know, Republicans gave Americans less than 2 days to evaluate a bill that will radically restructure the Medicaid program, shift trillions of dollars onto states, forcing them to ration care and rip health coverage away from 30 million people. In short, the bill is a disgrace. We should have been working together to repair Obamacare. Any major bill that's passed like that needs to be tweaked when we see how it works. It was true of Medicare, Medicaid, the Civil Rights Acts of the 1960s. We could have worked together, but instead, what did we get? We removed Obamacare, which helped so many people. Yes, there were problems with it. This doesn't fix it. It makes it worse.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair recognizes the gentlelady, the Subcommittee Chair for Telecommunications, Ms. Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm appreciating this revisionist history that is going on about what was posted, what was passed, what was read, and we know what caused disruption. I want to thank Mr. Barton for the amendments that he will offer that will address concerns that some of us have. I applaud the efforts of this committee with the Patient and State Stability Fund programs. This is something that will give some needed flexibility to our states to allow them to address the needs that our constituents, their constituents have. We know that this legislation led to a law that is too expensive to afford and too expensive to use, and I appreciate our efforts to get it off the books and address the concerns of our constituents. Yield back.
Gentlelady yields back the balance of time. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill has had no public hearings, no Congressional Budget Office cost estimates. It will have less health care coverage, more uninsured, fewer protections, higher cost, and that's what this bill will mean for millions of Americans. It will lead to millions losing health care, people paying more for less and rationing care. This plan makes a meaningful health care standard worse for millions of Americans. Under this plan, many Americans will be pushed into bad coverage that they can't afford to use, and millions more will become uninsured altogether. It's no way lives up to the rhetoric President Trump said that the Republican plan will mean coverage for everyone at much lower cost. Conservative leader Avik Roy went so far as to say expanding subsidies for high earners, cutting health coverage off from working poor. It sounds like a left-wing caricature of a mustache-twirling, top-hatted Republican fat cat. I agree with him. The repeal bill will not protect patients, will not save money, and will not help working families. Instead, it's a drastic, devastating step backward, and the only people who stand to benefit are the healthy and the wealthy. And I'll yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back balance of his time. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, the whip of the House, Mr. Scalise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think let's first be clear why we're here. Obamacare has failed the American people. This is my original version of Obamacare. I had just gotten on the committee in 2009, sat way down there at the very end as a freshman on this committee when Obamacare came through, and we predicted when we read this bill the devastation that would occur. Why do you think families are experiencing double-digit price increases in their health care premiums every single year because of Obamacare? It's in the bill. We said it was going to happen. Families are facing over $10,000 deductibles in many cases because of the unworkable mandates and taxes in this bill. Families have been begging for relief from this law and saying, just give us freedom. Let us make our own health care choices. No unelected bureaucrat in Washington should be able to tell you what you can or can't buy in such an important personal decision. I applaud not only the chairman and our other colleagues here in the House, I applaud President Trump for working with us to bring forward a bill that's common sense, that lets patients be in charge of their health care decisions so we can lower costs and actually put them back in charge of this very personal decision. We need to pass this bill and get the president to sign it. I yield back.
Expired. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Colorado for a 1-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, even though the majority has refused to send this bill for a score to the CBO before we mark it up, Joe Antos from the American Enterprise Institute has estimated that 10 to 15 million people will lose their insurance because of this legislation, and a number of other think tanks have said the same. I want to ask you a question, Mr. Chairman. Who are those 10 to 15 million people? Is it Lori Dunkley, my high school classmate, who finally got insurance when she was age 56 of the Medicaid expansion? Is it the young woman who came to my listening session and said that finally, after years of mental illness, she was able to get treatment, and now she is in graduate school and she's going to have a great job? Is it your next door neighbor? Is it your health care provider? Who are these 10 to 15 million people who are going to lose health insurance? We should sit down together, just like we did on 21st Century Cures. We should come up with a bill that fixes Obamacare that we could pass unanimously, and then we could uphold the proud tradition of this committee.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta, for purposes of a 1-minute opening statement.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for holding this hearing today. And I think what the American people want and what we want to get done here today is to make sure that we have a patient-centered health care system. But as the gentleman, my colleague from Louisiana, mentioned, that we've seen that over time the Obamacare has not worked, and just by the numbers, 25% increase in premiums on most Americans this past year. 1/3 of the counties in this country only offer one insurer. 4.7 million Americans were kicked off their health care plans because of Obamacare. 18 failed Obamacare co-ops out of 23, costing the taxpayers about almost $2 billion. This has not worked, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate you holding this markup today, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back balance of his time. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Doyle, for a 1-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For 7 years, you promised the American people you're going to repeal and replace Obamacare. And this is what you've come up with? This is a bad joke. No wonder you've been hiding this dog in a cave with an armed guard until Monday night. No wonder you're not holding hearings on this bill. No wonder you're rushing through this markup. No wonder you're going to try to vote it in 2 weeks. Today, Republicans give you survival of the fittest, starring health care for the healthy and wealthy. For the rest of Americans, you're going to pay more money, you're going to get less coverage. The American Enterprise Institute, 10 to 15 million people are going to lose their health care. And how do they pay for this dog? Over in the Ways and Means Committee, they're playing reverse Robin Hood. $600 billion in tax cuts for companies and rich people. Boy, they really are looking forward to getting that money. And you pay for this bill on the backs of the Medicaid expansion and Medicare recipients. It is disgraceful, and when people find out about this bill, you're going to wish you don't go anywhere near your hometown town hall meetings.
Time has
You've been
expired.
ducking them, and wait till you go home and get a handful of this.
Time's expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Lance, for 1 minute for opening statement. He yields. Mr. Guthrie, Mr. Olson. Yields. Mr. McKinley. Yield. Mr. Griffith. Yield. Who's after that? Mr. Bilirakis? Mr. Johnson?
Yield.
All right, Mr. Long. Mr. Mullen. Oh, no, wait, we got to come over here. Mr. Bouchon, right? Nope. Mr. Flores? Ms. Brooks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I recognize you for 1 minute for opening statement.
Today's markup's the beginning of an open and transparent process that will repeal Obamacare and rebuild our healthcare system so that Americans' healthcare coverage works better for them. Today, 45% of people paying the penalty for not buying insurance who have requested an exemption under the Obamacare individual mandate are under 35 years old. The individual mandate is bad policy and doesn't work. I've been hearing this from my constituents for years. Young, healthy people simply aren't buying insurance coverage, which is driving up costs and premiums for everyone who does. Our plan encourages people of all ages to enroll in a plan that's right for them and incentivizes them to stay covered, making that coverage more affordable for everyone. While making important reforms like this one, our plan also preserves important health care provisions, protecting coverage for people with pre-existing conditions, banning lifetime caps, keeping Medicare Part D donut hole, and allowing young adults under the age of 26 to remain on their parents' insurance plans. I look forward to our colleagues working to get this passed, and I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. Now recognize the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Schakowsky, for 1 minute for an opening statement.
As President Trump often says, bad, sad. Even if we could all agree that we need to make health care more affordable and accessible, this bill does the opposite. You pay more and you get less. The Republican repeal bill even gives huge tax breaks to the rich while taking away health coverage from millions and millions of Americans, drastically increasing the cost in health insurance, with the biggest increases for seniors and working families. It would radically change the Medicaid program, slashing funding and covering fewer people. The bill will force governors and state legislators to ration care. And who will they want to cut, or who will they cut? Children, the elderly, people with disabilities. In fact, our Republican Governor Bruce Rauner said that our state, Illinois, quote, won't do very well, unquote, if the Republican repeal bill becomes law. I oppose this bill because I believe that all Americans deserve access to Affordable Care Act. If we want to work together, let's fix Obamacare.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Mullen, for 1 minute.
I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. Chair recognizes gentleman Mr. Butterfield for 1 minute for an opening statement.
One of the proudest days in American legislative history was the enactment of the Affordable Care Act. It put in place a way for every American citizen to obtain affordable health care coverage. The law provides subsidies for those low and middle income Americans to assist with the purchase of insurance. It took insurance companies out of the equations. It prevents insurance companies from denying coverage. It provided for expanding Medicaid to allow those low-income, childless adults to obtain coverage through the Medicaid program, and we agreed to pay 90% of the cost. You have tried and failed on more than 50 occasions to repeal this law. Now you have a president who is willing to join you in your repeal efforts. You want to eliminate subsidies, and you want to replace them simply with a $2,000 tax credit that taxpayers will receive on their taxes. Millions of Americans don't have the money to pay for insurance without assistance. You must know that. You have the numbers here in this House to pass this legislation, but you must, as Mr. Doyle said a minute ago, you must understand the political consequences when you take 20 million people and take their insurance away from them.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes, I guess, next the gentleman from New York, Mr. Collins.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
Chair would now recognize the gentlelady from California, my friend Ms. Matsui, for 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 6 years ago, we carefully crafted a plan that has provided access to care for over 20 million people. Today, you are taking all of that away. This so-called plan will do nothing but ration care and drive up costs for hard-working families across this country. Hundreds of people in my district have filled my town halls, called my office, and written me about how they rely on the ACA's benefits. People like Kate Washington, who came to my town hall in Sacramento and described her husband's battle with cancer. She spoke about the importance of removing lifetime caps on coverage included in the ACA. This is personal for Kate, it's personal for all of my constituents, it's personal for me. Democrats are not going to stand for this plan to slash funding for long-term care, substance abuse, and preventive services. We're not engaged in this effort to raise out-of-pocket costs for seniors, reverse the progress we have made on mental health reform, and put Medicare at risk. We are united in our determination to stop this attempt to ration care for the most vulnerable in our communities. There is so much on the line today for so many, and Republicans are ignoring what's at stake.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Dakota, Mr. Kramer. Gentleman reserves his time. Mr. Sarbanes, you're recognized for 1 minute for purposes of an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Make no mistake, this proposal will effectively destroy the health insurance exchanges, which have made a difference for millions of Americans across the country. It downgrades the credits that are available in the exchanges and eliminates other supports that offer relief from deductibles and copays. The bottom line is the cost of purchasing health care in the exchanges will go up for many people, particularly for older Americans, those who are approaching Medicare but are not yet eligible, who are trying to get coverage. This will effectively destroy the Medicaid program. It takes money away from the Medicaid program, which serves millions of hardworking Americans, people with disabilities, seniors, and nursing homes, while giving a huge tax break to wealthy Americans, pharmaceutical companies, and the health insurance industry. This proposal, the GOP proposal, sends us back to the days where millions of people are left out of the health care system and turn to hospital emergency rooms to get their care, driving the cost of premiums up for everyone else. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we work to improve the Medicaid program, it is necessary that we maintain the existing state-federal partnership. A key piece of the reforms we are considering today is providing states with the flexibility to administer their individual programs. That includes the ability for states to innovate and implement initiatives within federal Medicaid guidelines. Flexibility is critical because many states have implemented programs, such as California's hospital financing program, to supplement state Medicaid funds. It is encouraging that nothing in this legislation limits that state flexibility to administer such programs. Reforming the existing Medicaid program is critical. Without reform, we cannot ensure quality to our most vulnerable populations while safeguarding the long-term solvency of this essential program. An improved state-federal partnership that expands state flexibility is just one of the ways we can achieve that goal. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney, for a 1-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This Republican plan is trying to do health care on the cheap. The bottom line is that if you are a family living paycheck to paycheck, you have a lot to be afraid of. You will either pay more for less coverage or you will lose coverage altogether. In the 3 counties of my district, 263,000 people gained coverage with the Affordable Care Act. All of them are at risk. In San Joaquin County, 4,000 people's jobs will be lost if the ACA is repealed like this. The Republican plan enhances health savings accounts, but how does that help people that live paycheck to paycheck? States will get less funding for Medicaid and will throw people off coverage or provide less coverage. This plan is especially hurtful to seniors with a double whammy. They'll have higher premiums or tax credit reductions. So why are we doing this? This is a charge of the Light Brigade. Your members will get hurt, and this bill has no chance of passage. Mr. Chairman, withdraw this message bill and work with us to improve the Affordable Care Act.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Costello, for an opening statement.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, there's been a lot of discussion about the fact that this bill has just appeared yesterday and that it was being hidden. Was it really being hidden from Democrats in America, or was it being hidden from your Freedom Caucus? They say that this bill is a phony repeal of Obamacare. And you want to know something? They're right, because there is a lot of plagiarism in this bill. The insurance reforms that all of you voted against, you're now bragging you're keeping. The subsidies that you say are horrible, you have changed from a direct subsidy that actually provided meaningful access to health care to on-the-cheap tax credits that don't do the job. But that's an entitlement that you say you're against. The mandate, you've decried the mandate, but what you've done is imposed a 30% penalty, and the revenues don't go to the health care program, the revenues go to the insurance companies. What is going on here?
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Buddy Carter, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we're taking the first step to fixing our healthcare system that is failing for millions of Americans. After watching promise after promise broken, it is clear that a top-down, one-size-fits-all model for healthcare has provided us with little choice and a wealth of mandates. Our plan recognizes that people deserve patient-centered care, not more bureaucracy. You should have the freedom and the flexibility to choose the care that's best for you. Insurers should compete for your business and treat you fairly no matter what. And at every step, patients should be in the driver's seat. We're taking steps in our plan to strengthen the health care market by loosening Obamacare's age rating ratio, which is used to adjust premium amounts according to an individual's age. This unrealistic regulation has filled insurance pools with older, less healthy individuals while driving younger and healthier individuals from the insurance market, driving the cost of health care up for everyone. As members of Congress, we have a responsibility not to sit idly by, but to take the necessary steps to repair our health care system, and I yield back, Mr.
Time has expired. Chair recognizes the chairman of the DCC, my friend from New Mexico, Mr. Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's bill should be about real people, real families living check to check, real parents trying to care for their sick kids. But that's not the bill before us today, not even close. This legislation begs two questions from my friends across the aisle. Have they forgotten these real hardworking people, or are they intentionally ignoring them because this bill pits sick children against aging grandparents and it turns its back on families living check to check? The bill literally charges the disabled, senior citizens, women, and children more, then gives tax breaks to the very wealthy and to insurance companies. As Mr. Spiro wrote, it's Republicans who are rushing to jam through their legislation to repeal the law in a highly secretive process. Speaker Ryan said, we're not hatching some bill in a back room and plopping it on the American people's front door. I'll say just check Rand Paul's Twitter feeds. This is what Mr. Spiro also wrote. Republicans are making their members walk the plank with blindfolds on because they have no other choice. I hope my colleagues ask the tough questions that their constituents are demanding, because this is the time to ask those questions. We cannot go home to our people that entrusted us without any answers.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Hudson, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's a great day for America. Today's about Sandra from Stanley County, North Carolina, whose deductible increased from $200 a month before Obamacare to over $3,000 a month. She told me that she actually some months has to decide between going to the doctor and buying groceries. It's about Kevin from Cabarrus County, North Carolina, whose insurance premiums rose from $110 a month to $730 a month, a 700% increase, with a deductible of $7,600. That means he's got to pay $16,000 out of pocket before he even accesses health care. This is about Colleen, a small business owner who started a business in her garage, now has 30 employees. After the Affordable Care Act passed, she got a letter saying her insurance company was dropping their coverage. They were saying, no thanks. This is about real people out there who are being hurt. And today, we begin the process of bringing them relief, of putting them in control so that they can decide what kind of health care they want and they can get it at a price they can afford. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you on this. It's not a perfect bill, but it's the right direction. Thank you.
Gentleman, time has expired. I appreciate the gentleman's comments. We'll now go to Mr. Tonko for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had prepared a longer, more detailed opening statement, but in yet another breach of this committee's tradition and protocols that are quickly becoming the norm, I was informed that members would only be allowed 1 minute to speak. This is clearly an attempt to silence us. Our voices and the voices of the American people, however, will not be silenced. With the brief time that I do have, let me just say that the Republican repeal plan before us is a tax cut bill dressed up as a health care bill. Nothing in this bill will lower out-of-pocket health care costs for families or address outrageous prescription drug prices. Nothing in this bill will make Americans healthier or more financially secure. Most egregiously, this bill will rip health care away from millions of currently insured Americans in a cynical ploy to deliver tax cuts to the super rich. I oppose this bill, and I will fight it with every fiber of my being and with all the energy I have because, unlike some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I did not get elected to take health care away from my constituents.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes Gentlelady Ms. Clark for a minute for opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Iowa for an opening statement.
Mr. Chair, I reserve.
Chairman recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Schrader, for an opening statement. Gentleman recognizes Mr. Kennedy. Reserves. Where do we go next? The gentleman from California, I guess, is next. I'm just trying to figure out the flow here.
Mr. Chairman, I
recognized
reserve.
for 1 minute. Reserves. Another gentleman from California, Ms. Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I became a doctor to help struggling families get the care they need when they need it most. Healthcare providers like me want nothing more than for patients to have adequate health coverage so they can have the access to care that they need, preventative, primary, follow-up services, you name it. But just because coverage is offered, if people can't afford it, what good will it do? Affordability equals access. In my years in medicine, I've never met a patient who didn't have coverage because they didn't want it. They didn't have coverage because they couldn't afford it. So I am deeply concerned that this bill will make premiums and other healthcare costs unaffordable for working families and seniors, and they will lose their insurance and care. At a time when far too many Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, this bill will impose harsh penalties, call it a sick tax for patients for an entire year if, for no fault of their own, lost their job and lost their insurance. It will drastically increase premiums for seniors because they will have to pay 5 times more coverage than young adults. This bill is unacceptable. This will make healthcare more costly for families, for seniors, and they will get less in return.
Time has expired. Chair would recognize the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Harper, for 1 minute for an opening statement.
Reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Who's next on your side? Mr. Peters for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't here for the fight over Obamacare, but I came to this committee this year antsy to be part of a constructive effort to continue to improve the healthcare system. And there were a lot of great things in the Affordable Care Act, which apparently the majority agrees because they are trying to preserve or recreate many of them. In some places, like my district, where so many get insurance through their employer or through the covered California exchange, it's working pretty well. And in fact, in my district, the uninsured rate has dropped from 9.4% to 5.4% since the ACA was passed. But we know that in other markets, they're lacking competition and consumers are faced with fewer options. And I acknowledge that these are challenges that need to be addressed. But I also recognize that clearly there's no interest from the majority in a bipartisan solution to fix them. Instead, we have a proposal that would damage these markets even further and shift more costs onto working families. The majority gave up on getting any of our votes before they even began writing their bill. And that's a shame because we can do better. We have to do better. And I hope whether this bill dies on the floor of the House or the door to the Senate that we will do better than this.
Gentleman's time has expired. Are there any members on the majority side that would like to seek recognition? Seeing none, Chair recognizes now the gentlelady from Michigan, Ms. Dingell, for 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing but respect for my colleagues on the other side, but respectfully have huge differences today. Our job is to represent the working men and women and their families of our district and to fight to protect them. As been said several times, pure and simply, this bill is less coverage, fewer protections, and higher costs. I wasn't in Congress when we passed the Affordable Care Act, but I know someone who was intimately involved in the process. In fact, we're in a room that bears his name. This was his life's work, and I can tell you that on behalf of John Dingell, President Ted Kennedy should have been, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and the generations of other leaders who fought for the right of every American for a quality, affordable health care. We cannot let you take health care away from people who need it most, and we will not go down without a fight.
Thank you, Deb.
I yield back the rest of my time.
Gentlelady yields back the balance of time. Are there any members on the majority side seeking recognition? Seeing none, any on the Democratic side seeking recognition for an opening statement? Is that a yes now? Okay. Gentleman from Iowa, Ms. Loebsack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today we are considering a bill that will rip quality care from Iowans. This legislation works to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which has helped Iowans get back on their feet and has provided quality health care to thousands of Iowa families. Under the Affordable Care Act, 255,000 uninsured Iowans gained expanded health insurance options both through Medicaid and private health plans within the marketplace. Additionally, hundreds of thousands of Iowans have gained coverage for affordable preventative health care services. Rather than improving our nation's health care, today's legislation would move us backwards, stripping Iowans of important health care services and covering fewer people at higher costs. Since the debate about how to improve our nation's health care system began, my number one priority has been to ensure all Iowans and Americans have access to quality, affordable care. This legislation undermines that goal. Make no mistake about it. Today, the health care of my constituents, Iowans, and Americans is at risk, and that is something that I will not stand for, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Okay, let's go through the list here. Ms. Clark, for 1 minute for opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm against the sham reverse Robin Hood take from the poor, give to the rich American Health Care Act. The Republicans would like to paint a rosy utopian picture of life prior to the Affordable Care Act. That's fake news, as Donald Trump would say. Well, let me remind you of how it really was prior to the Affordable Care Act. Prior to the ACA, in the United States, one of the wealthiest nations in the world, we had nearly 47 million Americans who lacked health insurance. Additionally, a study by the Department of Health and Human Services found that 17.1 million Americans under the age of 65 were underinsured, of which 9.3 million had employer-based insurance. Tragically, people in these situations often had to go without vital health care simply because they couldn't afford it. However, after the passage of ACA, only 8.6% of Americans, about 27.3 million people, are uninsured. The first time in history that the nation's uninsured rate fell below 9%. The American Health Care Act puts all these positive gains at risk. We can't afford to go back to pre-ACA days. Health care is a fundamental human right and not a commodity, not an iPhone as the Republicans are treating it. Highly reckless and extremely irresponsible. We have a responsibility to our citizens.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Other members seeking recognition. Mr. Schrader, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Affordable Care Act is responsible for 20 million Americans getting health care and hundreds of thousands of Oregonians. It's begun to bend the cost curve in health care spending, putting us on a path to sustainability and reducing our deficit, and making sure the Medicare Trust Fund is solvent for many years to come. I'm disappointed to be here today as the Republicans try and repeal this great act. We're marking the bill up without any input from the Congressional Budget Office. Risk falling back on the progress we've made to reduce the deficit and ensure seniors, children, and disabled have access to health care. The bill we're considering also rolls back a lot of the progress we've made in my home state of Oregon to bring down costs and improve outcomes without cutting reimbursement. Perhaps worst of all, the bill in front of us today rolled back a lot of successes we've had while failing to fix the problems that need help. Rather than reduce premiums, it has the potential to increase them as much as 30%. We need to do better.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair, any members on the Republican side seeking recognition? Seeing none, Chair recognizes gentleman, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, I was struck last night by a comment that I heard made by Speaker Ryan, where he called this repeal bill, quote, an act of mercy. With all due respect to our Speaker, he and I must have read different scripture. The one that I read calls on us to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to shelter the homeless, and to comfort the sick. It reminds us that we are judged not by how we treat the powerful, but by how we care for the least among us. Mercy. Defined in purely secular terms, it's compassionate treatment for those in distress. It's kindness, and it is grace. There is no mercy in a system that makes healthcare a luxury. There's no mercy in a country that turns their back on those most in need of protection, the elderly, the poor, the sick, and the suffering. There's no mercy in a cold shoulder to the mentally ill. There's no mercy in a policy that takes for granted the sweat, the tears, and the sacrifice of working Americans that they shed every day so that they might care for their family's basic needs, food, shelter, health, and hope for tomorrow. There's no mercy for the 2.6 million people who will lose their job if Obamacare is repealed. This is not an act of mercy.
Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Washington State, the conference chairman of the Republicans, Ms. Catherine Morris Rogers, for 1 minute for an opening
Thank you, Mr.
statement.
Chairman. We're on a rescue mission. Obamacare, though well-intentioned, has failed. It's failed in its goals, and it has failed in its promises. People in Eastern Washington are paying more and more for health care. Millions of Americans have lost their health care plans. Millions of Americans can no longer access the doctor of their choice. Medicaid, a very important safety net, is plagued with access problems, poor quality of health, unsustainable funding. And this has been going on for years. And yet Obamacare forced about 50% of the newly insured people into Medicaid nationwide. It was over 80% in Washington state. This jeopardizes this important safety net for the people who need it the most, the poor, the elderly, children, people with disabilities. I recognize many individuals with disabilities rely on Medicaid for their health care, and I am committed to ensuring that they have access to care at home and in the community moving forward. Everyone should have access to quality, affordable health care coverage, and that's why we're moving forward with a plan that protects individuals with pre-existing conditions, responsibly unwinds the Medicaid expansion, and helps Americans afford health insurance through advanceable tax credits.
Time has expired. Are there other members seeking recognition? The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute for purposes of an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, the Republicans are cheating hardworking Americans. Their plan will force middle-class families to pay more for less. It takes away health care protections to up to 129 million Americans with pre-existing conditions, and it means seniors will pay up to $2,000 to $3,000 more every year. What's more, this bill lines the pockets of insurance companies. If you have any lapse in coverage, insurance companies have to charge you up to 30% more for the care that you used to get. To add insult to injury, this bill gives a tax break to CEOs of those insurance companies. That's what I call the keep quiet clause. Middle-class families get screwed under this bill. We know that this bill will raise our national deficit and hurt our economy, but we can't tell you exactly by how much because the Congressional Budget Office hasn't had the opportunity to give us that score. Myself and the rest of the members of the committee, your elected representatives, were not allowed to see the bill until 2 days ago. When the Affordable Care Act was passed in 2010, the House alone had 79 public hearings. The bottom line is this: the Republican plan is doing all that it can to kick you to the curb and take away your health care. I yield back.
With that, the gentleman's time's expired. Are there other members seeking recognition who have not been recognized? At that point, then,
Mr. Chairman,
the chair calls up the
Mr.
committee
Chairman,
print. I'll get to you in just a second. The chair calls up the committee print and asks the clerk to report.
Mr. Chairman, I would like
the
to...
The chair calls up the committee print. Just a moment, I'll get to you. And asks the committee print, the clerk to report.
Committee print. Budget reconciliation,
Mr. Chairman.
legislative recommendations relating to repeal and replace of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act.
Without objection, the first reading of the committee print dispensed with. The committee will print will be open for amendment at any point so ordered. With that, I'd recognize the gentleman from New Jersey.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into some parliamentary inquiries about the process today. I think it'll make it easier for us if you can answer certain questions pursuant to a colloquy with me.
Happy to have that discussion.
First of all, with regard to the schedule, should we be prepared to work late into evening each markup day, or do you plan to complete debate at a certain time and then move to the next?
It appears, based on the fact there are no amendments available for consideration, that we should be done fairly soon.
And what does that mean? What are you referencing now?
No amendments have been filed or shared with the...
We have many amendments, Mr. Chairman.
None of them, just a moment, please. None of them, we're in a colloquy here. We have received no amendments. None have been filed. We look forward to seeing your amendments.
Mr. Chairman,
so
I don't understand what you're talking about. There are numerous amendments on behalf of the Democrats and the minority.
We have no amendments at the table. There are no amendments have been filed. It's hard for me to consider how long we're going to be here until we know what your amendments are.
Okay, if that's
Can you tell me, let me ask you a question. How many amendments do you plan to offer?
I think we have about 100 amendments.
100 amendments. We've not seen any of them.
When
can we anticipate seeing
We will certainly provide you with those amendments.
When will we see those?
My understanding is that they're available.
They're available now?
We
have not...
They'll be provided within the customary 2-hour limit.
All right. Well, we're kind of there with the bill.
Well, I don't think so. But anyway, obviously, we're not going to answer.
The bill is before it.
We're not going to answer the questions about the schedule. I'm trying to get some handle here. If you just want to be, try to jam this thing through and not talk about the schedule, that's fine. I can play that game too. No questions, no answers about the schedule, correct?
No, that's not what
I simply asked the question.
Gentlemen, please suspend. I can't comment on how long we're going to be here until I know how many amendments we're going to consider.
All right,
You've told me now for the first time you may have 100 amendments. That tells us we're going to be here long. I don't know how long people are going to debate those amendments.
Let's go to the next.
Let me finish. Happy to give you guidance once I know what you're planning on.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for a parliamentary inquiry.
Is it not the rule of the committee that amendments have to be made available 2 hours before the markup begins?
2 hours before the amendments are considered.
If I could, since I'm actually have the gavel, it's the policy of the committee that they be considered 2 hours in advance. That's been the tradition of the committee. As you know, as a chairman, I believe Mr. Upton knows, generally to be able to give more thoughtful consideration, the sooner they're filed, the better. So our staffs can review them, members can review them.
Okay, further parliamentary inquiry.
Gentleman's recognized for parliamentary inquiry.
Since it's the policy of the committee that amendments be made available 2 hours before the markup begins, and since this markup began at approximately 10:30, should not those amendments that the minority wishes to offer have been already made available in order to be considered?
My understanding is it's 2 hours before the amendments are considered.
If the gentleman would suspend, it is the normal policy that they'd be provided ahead of time, 2 hours in advance. That makes it all work better for all members on both sides to be able to look at amendments. We look forward to the minority placing their amendments in front of us and filing, but it's pretty hard for me to figure out how long we're going to be here until I know how many amendments we're going to have.
All right, let's move on.
Chairman, I have a parliamentary inquiry.
That the amendment should be made available 2 hours before the markup.
2 hours before
they have not.
The gentleman suspend.
Mr. Chairman, they have not been made available. And to begin regular order and consider.
There's no regular order here. The regular order ended. There's no regular order.
With respect, Mr. Chairman, if the minority
Gentlemen will suspend. Please. Gentlemen will suspend. We look forward to getting your amendments and moving through on regular order. Now, I'd recognize the gentleman from New Jersey. Do you have another question?
Yes, I do. My understanding, based on what you told us before the committee markup, was that amendments on any section were going to be in order at any time. Well, now, I'm told that you want to move to a process where we go section by section. That is not what we were told beforehand, and I intend to proceed with having amendments open at any time on any section rather than moving section by section. So let me ask again, is that the case? My understanding was beforehand that you were not going to move section by section.
Well, that's not what we shared with your staff yesterday. Was our preference to follow the same procedures that have been followed before, including by Mr. Waxman, former chairman of this committee, to go and during the ACA markup to go subtitle by subtitle. It is still open for amendment at any time. If you don't want to proceed that way, that we'll recognize the amendments. It just makes it more a thoughtful approach to go subtitle by subtitle. It's easier on both staffs to work through the amendments. If it's a Medicaid amendment, we're happy to go through the amendments. We'll be here till we finish the amendments. This was simply a way to make it more organized for the committee members and for our staff to be able to work through them, especially since we still don't have your 100 amendments.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I was told that your staff indicated to us that we were going to be open to amendment on any section at any time. We were not moving section by section. Regardless of that, we do not intend to move section by section. We're going to offer amendments on any topic as we proceed, not section by section.
Then we'll move on. The chair recognizes himself for purposes of offering an amendment.
I have some additional questions which I think would make things go easier again.
Really?
If we could go through them, yes.
Now you look forward to that.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, about rolling of votes. You know that when we had our initial organizing meeting, I was very much opposed to the idea of rolling votes. You expressed the fact that you were not going to try to roll votes in most circumstances. Today, in particular, because we have such an important bill, because we are all here and we're going to debate amendments as we go along, I see no reason to roll votes. So I would ask that we not move to a process of rolling the votes, but rather proceed amendment by amendment with the discussion and not roll votes, because it's important that members be here for the entire debate. So I issue that question. I would ask that we not roll votes.
Well, that it always resides with the chair to make that decision, but as I've said, I will consult with you on those matters for the convenience of members, but we intend to move forward amendment by amendment, vote by vote.
All right, I appreciate that. Now, my last question is about the actual vehicle before us. My question is what we're considering today a bill, a committee draft? What exactly is it that we're considering?
It is a committee print.
Okay. So does that mean that in terms of the procedural pathway, that once this committee print has been amended and the markup proceeding has concluded, will that then be reintroduced in some form as a bill? Will it be introduced as a bill once we finish? Will it be reported out of our committee?
The gentleman probably knows what we do here is forwarded up to the Budget Committee. This is the reconciliation process. I know in the past, under the Democrats, this process was skipped at some point, and everything just was done up at Budget Committee. We're actually going through regular order to take amendments, to go through a committee print, and then we will submit our product to the Budget Committee.
All right,
there it goes to the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee will report a bill to the floor.
All right, so let me go back to that again. What you're saying is because of a reconciliation process and alleged regular order, again, I would point out that we're not doing regular order because we didn't have a hearing and a subcommittee markup. But if you're saying that this is the reconciliation process, I don't understand how you can make that statement, because the fact of the matter is that much of what's in this committee print is not in the nature of reconciliation. I mean, a lot of this is what we call birdable, which means it would have to be significantly changed before the Senate could take it up as a reconciliation bill.
Yield. Questions of the Senate are of the Senate's decision-making, not ours. We are not bound by the rules of the Senate. We are the United States House of Representatives. We are the Energy and Commerce Committee. We will do our job in regular order as we have under our rules with due consideration.
All right, so what you're saying then is that even though this is a committee print and not a bill, and therefore is going to go through the reconciliation process, you have gone beyond the reconciliation process in terms of the subject matter, going into things that could not be part of the reconciliation process.
That is not the case. That is not the case. I'm not saying that. I don't believe that.
No, I understand, but Mr. Chairman,
if you'll let me finish.
Yes.
I'm not saying that. I don't believe that to be the case. This was in our procedures of reconciliation. As I say, the Senate has different procedures. We don't even have the option to have the Senate parliamentarians come tell us what we want. And by the way, I don't want the Senate parliamentarians telling us what we can or cannot do. Now, if we could proceed.
Well, let me just ask one more question.
This was your last question.
Well, except that you made the point that made me think about one other problem here. Why, if you're going through the reconciliation process, or if you're going to go beyond it in terms of the Senate, I know you're not worried about the Senate, I don't quite understand that. Why is it that we're going through this procedure as opposed to just doing a regular bill? It seemed to me
because this is the reconciliation process. This is open to us. We have instructions to the Budget Committee. So I appreciate the gentleman. We're going to move forward. The chair recognizes
Mr. Chairman,
service.
We have a question from the gentleman from New Mexico.
Excuse me. If you would suspend, we're going to move forward with the regular order. The chair recognizes. The chair is not recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion before we go through the amendment process.
No, that is not how this is going to work. The chair recognizes
Mr. Chairman, I have
for
a
the
motion
purposes of offering an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Chairman,
the
I
clerk
have a
will report
parliamentary chair.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, a parliamentary inquiry.
Gentlemen will suspend. The clerk will report the amendment.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
Amendment to the committee print
So
offered
you're
by
not inquiry, Mr.
Title
Chairman.
I, Energy and Commerce.
I have
Subtitle
a
A,
parliamentary
patient
inquiry,
access to
Mr.
public
Chairman.
and health programs.
Mr. Chairman.
Ask unanimous
101.
consent to suspend without. Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with.
I object.
Mr. Chairman, I'm simply asking for recognition with regard to a parliamentary inquiry. If you're not going to recognize that, I don't know how you're going to proceed.
Mr. Pallone, I didn't say I wouldn't recognize you. I'm trying to follow regular order. We were trying to dispense with that. Then I will recognize you now for your parliamentary
Mr. Chairman,
inquiry.
I objected to the suspension that you were just going through, and that was the subject of my parliamentary inquiry. So I object to proceeding
So
forward.
you're asking, which one of you wants to go first with your
All right,
parliamentary
Mr. Chairman,
inquiry?
let me ask the parliamentary inquiry. What is it that you just tried to do there with the clerk in terms of suspension?
We are on the, I'm surprised you don't know this. This is the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
All right, before we get to the amendment in the nature of a substitute,
we're actually, if I could correct you, we're actually on the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
I objected, though, Mr. Chairman.
All right, well, then let's
So go ahead.
He was not recognized, Mr. Chairman.
We don't have to be recognized to object, Mr. Chairman.
No,
Mr. Chairman.
the chairman has the power of recognition.
Yeah, gentlemen, we'll get through this. Let's just all settle down here. So what's your parliamentary inquiry?
My parliamentary inquiry is as such. And first of all, let me say this, Mr. Chairman.
You must state your parliamentary inquiry.
You have stated over and over again from the very first day when we began the organization of this
Does
committee.
the gentleman have a parliamentary inquiry?
Yes, I would like to propose a motion to postpone the markup for 30 days.
That's not a
well, the point is,
gentlemen will suspend. I recognize you for a parliamentary inquiry.
The problem
What
that
is your inquiry?
My concern here, Mr. Chairman.
What is your inquiry?
My
please?
inquiry is, why is it that after repeatedly saying for the last few months...
Please state your inquiry.
My inquiry is, again, if I can state it, if you'll let me state it, is that after the last 2 months of repeatedly saying we were going to use regular order, that we were not going to try to jam things down, the members
Gentlemen
of
have a parliamentary inquiry.
Now you are proceeding to do exactly that. Okay.
So what's your inquiry?
I said to you that I would like to make a motion to postpone the markup for 30 days. I don't understand why that is not in order at this time. It should be in order.
Do you have a motion at the desk?
Yes. The motion is to postpone the markup for 30 days. That's motion number one.
I move to table the motion, if it really is a motion.
Do we have it? Where is it? Can your staff provide it for us?
Yes.
When did we receive it? You don't
We received
know.
the motion 3 minutes ago.
Okay.
Don't we have to consider it for 2 hours before you?
No, I'm not on a motion.
Motion to postpone markup for 30 days, offered by Rep. Pallone.
I do move to table the motion, Mr. Chairman.
All those in favor of tabling the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I think we should be able to have some debate on this motion. Again, what's the rush? You said...
Mr. Pallone, I know you don't...
That's not
the question... let me rule on this, please. A motion to table is not debatable under our rules, and I know you care deeply about following our rules.
Mr. Chairman,
so
again,
the question now occurs on the motion to table. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
We ask for the ayes and nays, Mr.
The ayes
Chairman.
appear to have it. The motion is
ayes-
tabled. I'm getting there. That we will ask for a roll call vote on the motion to table. All those in favor of tabling vote aye. Those opposed, no. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Barton. Mr. Barton votes aye. Mr. Upton. Mr. Upton votes aye. Mr. Shimkus. Mr. Shimkus votes aye. Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy votes aye. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess votes aye. Mrs. Blackburn. Mrs. Blackburn votes aye. Mr. Scalise. Mr. Latta.
Aye.
Mr. Latta votes aye. Mrs. McMorris Rogers. Mr. Harper. Mr. Harper votes aye. Mr. Lance. Mr. Lance votes aye. Mr. Guthrie. Mr. Guthrie votes aye. Mr. Olson. Mr. Olson votes aye. Mr. McKinley. Mr. McKinley votes aye. Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Kinzinger votes aye. Mr. Griffith. Mr. Griffith votes aye. Mr. Bilirakis. Mr. Bilirakis votes aye. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Long. Mr. Long votes aye. Mr. Bouchon. Mr. Bouchon votes aye. Mr. Flores. Mr. Flores votes aye. Mrs. Brooks. Mrs. Brooks votes aye. Mr. Mullen. Mr. Mullen votes aye. Mr. Hudson. Mr. Hudson votes aye. Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins votes aye. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Kramer votes aye. Mr. Wahlberg.
Aye.
Mr. Wahlberg votes aye. Mrs. Walters.
Aye.
Mrs. Walters votes aye. Mr. Costello. Mr. Costello votes aye. Mr. Carter. Mr. Pallone.
Mr. Chairman, you are trying to rush this bill. You are not allowing for debate. And if this process continues all day long, it's going to be a very unfortunate circumstance here. We're going to be here all night for several days. I vote no.
Mr. Pallone votes no. Mr. Rush.
Mr. Chairman, I fully concur with our ranking member's position. I think that for you to keep talking about regular order when you are certainly out of order, I vote.
Let me just say for members, the regular order during a roll call is not to have a debate on your vote.
Mr. Chairman,
so we will hold a
here
regular
you go
order.
again talking about regular order when regular order is not what you are exercising this morning.
Gentleman's
You haven't
out of
exercised
order.
As of yet.
Clerk will continue to call the roll.
Mr. Rush.
Mr. Rush votes no.
Mr. Rush votes no. Ms. Eshoo. No. Ms. Eshoo votes no. Mr. Engel. Mr. Green.
No.
Mr. Green votes no. Ms. DeGette. No. Ms. DeGette votes no. Mr. Doyle.
No.
Mr. Doyle votes no. Ms. Schakowsky.
No.
Ms. Schakowsky votes no. Mr. Butterfield.
No.
Mr. Butterfield votes no. Ms. Matsui.
No.
Ms. Matsui votes no. Ms. Castor.
No.
Ms. Castor votes no. Mr. Sarbanes.
No.
Mr. Sarbanes votes no. Mr. McNerney.
No.
Mr. McNerney votes no. Mr. Welch.
No.
Mr. Welch votes no. Mr. Lujan. Mr. Lujan votes no. Mr. Tonko.
No.
Mr. Tonko votes no. Ms. Clark. Mr. Loebsack.
No.
Mr. Loebsack votes no. Mr. Schrader.
No.
Mr. Schrader votes no. Mr. Kennedy.
No.
Mr. Kennedy votes no. Mr. Cardenas.
No.
Mr. Cardenas votes no. Mr. Ruiz.
No.
Mr. Ruiz votes no. Mr. Peters.
No.
Mr. Peters votes no. Ms. Dingle. No. Ms. Dingle votes no. Chairman Upton. Chairman Walden.
Swing and a miss. Fred's back. Walden votes yes on table. Are there other members who wish to be recorded? The gentlelady from Washington votes aye.
Rogers votes aye.
Gentleman from Louisiana.
Aye. Mr. Scalise votes aye.
Are there members on the minority side that have not been recorded? Are there other members who have not been recorded? The clerk will report the tally.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 30 ayes and 22 noes.
30 ayes, 22 noes. The motion carries and the tabling motion
Mr.
is
Chairman?
approved. Yes, gentleman from New Mexico is recognized. For what purpose does he seek recognition?
The first point, Mr. Chairman, is I had objected to the dispensing of the reading.
Right. Parliamentary. He said parliamentary.
I thought you were asking for a parliamentary inquiry.
In addition to objecting to the dispensing of the reading, I was also asking for a parliamentary inquiry because I was attempting to be recognized during your first request of dispensing of the reading, and I wasn't recognized, so I thought I would break decorum and just blurt it out the second time. My parliamentary inquiry is what's the proper way to be recognized to object when the chairman is asking for whether there's an objection to a ruling.
For what? So you asked for what reason you're seeking recognition. It was, if the gentleman suspend, it was a little difficult to hear your objection over Mr. Pallone's discussion at the same time. That's why I'm trying to keep regular order here so that we can be in a regular process and recognize members in regular order. And that's why I was trying to have one at a time and manage this. So the gentleman have a parliamentary inquiry?
Mr. Chairman, my question is there a ruling from the chair on my objection to the dispensing of the reading?
It came late.
It did not, Mr. Chairman. No. Roll the tapes. I mean, are we at the Oscars here? Can you put something up there for us?
Gentleman will suspend. Really, the chair is, the gentleman did object to the dispensing with the reading of the bill. But this is why it's important and why I will continue to try to get regular order, because it was difficult to hear the gentleman down there when I had my friend here also concerned about things. So that's why, for everybody's benefit, regular order, I will keep regular order so nobody's discriminated against. So is the gentleman objecting to the dispensing with the reading of the bill?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that was my objection.
All right. Then the clerk will read the bill. Members need to know this will take a couple of hours, which is fine. We're happy to do that. It would be helpful to the regular order process if the gentleladies on either side of the aisle have amendments. We would ask that you would have the courtesy to file those amendments so we can all get due consideration of the various amendments. I'm told you have 100 amendments or so by the Democrat leader.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Parliamentary inquiry. Is it possible to have a vote to suspend reading of the bill?
It is not.
Order or not? Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, a parliamentary inquiry?
Gentleman's recognized.
Going forward, what's the proper way to be recognized if the chairman is asking if there is an objection so that we can avoid having to yell and break decorum?
I wish I could help you with that. I was trying to get order here so that I could hear other members that are down dais. I was having trouble getting that.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
And so we are on the amendment in the nature of a substitute. We're delighted to share it and read it. As you know, it's been online since 6 o'clock on Monday. The clerk, or
Mr. Chairman.
10 o'clock yesterday.
Mr. Chairman.
10 o'clock yesterday. We're on the, just a second. We are on the, I want to make sure I've got this right. We're on the reading of the amendment, the substitute. That's what we're on. That's what the gentleman objected to dispensing with the reading of. So we will proceed. The clerk shall read. Let me recognize my friend from Oregon. For what purpose do you seek recognition?
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I had a motion at the desk on this particular nature of a substitute.
Yeah, I don't think we can get to that now until we read the bill.
All right.
We have to read it first. So the clerk will read the...
Mr. Chairman, could I ask one more sincere parliamentary inquiry?
Yes, sir.
At what point does this 2-hour clock start on amendments needing to be presented so they can be considered? In other words,
in advance of consideration.
In advance of consideration.
That
so
has been the...
If a member wishes to offer an amendment at some point today, they need to have them at the desk 2 hours before they're going to be offered. Is that correct?
Yeah. That is the chairman's policy.
Thank you, sir.
The clerk will now read the bill, the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Mr. Chair. Inquiry.
Yes?
With regard to what Mr. Barton said. My understanding is that the 2 hours is a courtesy, and we're going to abide by that. But that doesn't mean that we're going to give, that if someone wants to offer an amendment a little later in the process today, that they can.
Well, I assume you're going to have rolling groups of amendments come our way. We've been told to expect to be here through the weekend.
Exactly.
And that you have hundreds of amendments, not 100 or so.
So I just want to make sure that the answer to Mr. Barton's question wasn't that every amendment has to be given to you now. That is not the case. I want everyone to understand that.
Yeah, as chairman, I do have some discretion in these matters in terms of giving priority to amendments. Again, to improve the thoughtfulness of our legislative process, it would be helpful that you all make your amendments available, unless there's some reason not to. It just helps the overall process, it helps the staff, and it makes it go better, and people make more informed decisions. So I don't know why you would hide the ball. I'm not accusing you.
We're not trying to hide anything, even though you have hidden a lot. But the bottom line is
we're going to
try to get those amendments now.
Thank you.
They're not all going to be available right now.
Okay, we'll see them when we see them then. And we'll go now to the reading of the substitute.
Amendment to the committee print offered by Mr. Walden. Page 1, strike line 1 and all that follows through the end and insert the following. Title 1, Energy and Commerce. Subtitle A, Patient Access to Public Health Programs. Section 101, the Prevention and Public Health Fund. In general, subsection B of Section 4002 of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, 42 U.S. Code 300 EU-11, as amendment as amended by Section 5009 of the 21st Century Cures Act, is amended. In paragraph 1, by adding "and" at the end. In paragraph 3, by striking each of the fiscal years 2018 and 2019 and inserting fiscal year 2018, and by striking the semicolon at the end and inserting a period, and by striking paragraphs 4 through 8. Resertion of unobligated funds, of the funds made available by Section 4002, an unobligated balance at the end of fiscal year 2018 is rescinded. Section 102, Community Health Center Program, effective as if included in the enactment of the Medicaid Access and CHIP Reauthorization Act of 2015, Public Law 114-10, 129, Statistic 89, Paragraph 1 of Section
Mr. Chairman, there's no order in this committee room. You get
of
order?
such act is amended by inserting
Mr. Chairman.
an additional
Mr. Chairman, there's no order. I can't hear her.
for fiscal
The members on both sides of the aisle will please restrain themselves so that the gentleman from New Mexico can hear the reading and so can others. So if the majority members, I'm going to please, the minority members and the majority members, but especially this conclave right here, if we can hold it down, and to the audience as well, you're exactly right. We want people to hear the reading of the amendment.
after 2017. Section 103, federal payments to states. In general, notwithstanding Section 504A, 1902A23, 1903A, 2002, 2005, A4, 1202A7, or 1205A1 of the Social Security Act, 42 U.S. Code 704A, 1396AA 23, 1396BA, 1396A, 1397DA4, 1397BBA7, 1399EEA1, or the terms of any Medicaid waiver in effect on the date of enactment of this Act and is approved under Section 1115 or 1915 of the Social Security Act, 42 U.S. Code 1315, 1396N, for the 1-year period beginning on the date of the enactment of this Act. No federal funds provided from a program referred to in this subsection that is considered direct spending for any year may be made available to a state for payment to a prohibited entry, whether made directly to the prohibited entry or through a managed care organization under contract with the state. Definitions. In this section, prohibited entry, the term prohibited entry means an entry including its affiliates, subsidiaries, successors, or clinics, that as the date of enactment of this Act is an organization described in Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 and exempt from tax under Section 501A of such code, is an essential community provider described in a Section 156(235) of Title 45 Code of the Federal Regulations as in effect on the date enacted of this bill, that is primarily engaged in family planning services, reproductive health, and a related medical care, and provides for abortions or other than an abortion, if the pregnancy is the result of an act or rape or incest, or in the case where a woman suffers from a physical disorder, physical injury, or physical illness that would, as certified by a physician, place the woman in danger of death unless an abortion is performed, including a life-endangering physical condition caused by or arising from the pregnancy itself, and for which the total amount of federal and state expenditures under the Medicaid program under Title 21 of the Social Security Act in fiscal years 2014 made directly to the entity and to any affiliate, subsidies, successors, or clinics of the entity, or made to the entity and any affiliate, subsidies, successors, or clinics of the entity as part of a nationwide healthcare provider network exceeding $350 million. Direct spending. The term direct spending has a meaning given that the term under Section 250C of the Balanced Budget and Emergency Deficit Control Act of 1985 to U.S. Code 900C. Subtitle B, Medicaid Program Enhancement. Section 111, Repeal of Medicaid Provisions. The Social Security Act is amended in Section 1902, 42 U.S. Code 1396A in subsection A47B by inserting and providing.
All right, folks. I don't want to interrupt her while she's having to read 90 pages worth of information, lawyer talk for that much. But there's a Sean Spicer press briefing. We're going to be starting the stream in roughly 20 minutes, so we're going to shut this down in just a few minutes. Bring up the Sean Spicer stream up, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be a good one. There's a lot of information that is coming out. So I will put the link on the chat, but also the link is in the description below. Go and check it out. Give it a thumbs up. Make sure you set the notification, and we hope to see you guys on that chat.
-1E by striking under Clause I-8, Clause 1, Clause I-4, or Clause 220 of subsection A-10-9, and inserting under Clause I-8 or Clause 220 of subsection 1902 A-10A before January 1, 2020. Section 1902 A-10 AI4. Subsection 12, Repeal of Medicaid Expansion. In general, Section 1902 A10A of Social Security Act 42, U.S. Code 1396A, A10A is amended. In Clause I-8 by inserting at the option of a state after January 1, 2014, and in Clause 220 by inserting and ending December 31, 2019 after 2014. Determination of EFMAP for new ACA expansion enrollees. Section 1905 of the Social Security Act 42 U.S. Code 1396D is amended. In subsection Y1 in the matter preceding subparagraph A by striking with respect to and all that follows through shall be and inserting with respect to amounts extended before January 1, 2020 by such state for medical assistance for newly eligible individuals described in subclause 8